Why does the word passwordless get me so excited? Because passwords have caused me so much personal and professional strife in my life. Platform SSO feels like a step towards our glorious passwordless future. And in this session, I'm going to try to put Platform SSO into perspective. My name's Eric Dreyer, rhymes with Slayer, also rhymes with team player. I'm principal consulting engineer at Kanji, the Apple device management and security company. I want to take a moment to thank Patrick and the entire crew that's responsible for making this great event for us. So thank you. And I want to extend yet another warm welcome to everyone who's here for the first time. It was like half the room. And again, applause for everyone that's here for the first time. As you can tell, this is a really important conference to many of us who've been coming here for years. And I want to apologize to the people who are new that when I see an old friend like Andrew, like I just want to gravitate to him and talk to him and just like, sometimes it's to the exclusion of new people. So I want to remind everyone that's a long timer here. Please invite other people to your circle of conversation. Please include them because 5 years from now, you're going to have these memories from today with them. I want to thank DJ for sharing her story with you on Tuesday. That was her first public presentation in front of a crowd like this. And if you, yep. Please let her know if you'd like to see her continue giving presentations like these. And finally, if you're thinking about what story you can share at events like this, please let a current speaker or conference organizer know of your interest. More voices makes our community that much stronger. I've got some breaking news. We have a new Start Free trial button at our homepage. So you can all go to kanji.io, click that Start Free trial, enter your business email address, and then click Continue. Within literal minutes, you'll have a fully featured Kanji tenant up and running where you can deploy apps, manage operating systems, install profiles, run scripts, take a look at assignment maps, whatever you want. I want to take a moment to thank Patrick Wardle, who just finished his talk, for setting me up for success for this talk, because he mentioned, okay, two things. First, he mentioned that developers were politely asked to exit the kernel space 5 years ago, and I'm going to return to that in this session. And also, he included a banana in the presentation, so thank you for that. And he mentioned calculator not once, but twice. And I was trying really hard not to share this dad joke with you, but since it involves calculator, I couldn't resist. He said it once, and I'm like, okay, maybe I should say it. And then when he said it twice, like, oh, who cares if calculator crashes? I was like, that's my sign. I've got to share this joke. Mike Boylan actually shared this joke yesterday in our Dad Jokes channel in our internal Slack. So if you come work for us at Kanji, come work with us, you can join the Dad Jokes channel. I'm gonna take his joke and make it even bigger. So in iPadOS 18, like this is the serious part of the joke. In iPadOS 18, there's a new calculator. Like we finally have a calculator, and it's a different calculator. And it actually caused us a little bit of a challenge. We had to scramble a little bit because in our home screen layout library item, let's see if I can play this. In our home screen layout library item, where you can drag and drop icons for apps that you want to add to iPad or iPhone, calculator for iPad is different than calculator for iPhone. So behind the scenes, it's like a different bundle ID or something like that. And the team that put this together did a really amazing job. And this is just a quick illustration of how straightforward it is to create a home screen layout. You don't have to know the bundle ID. You just find the app and just drag it in. You want to create another page, you create another page. Drag it to the dock, create new folders. I could go on, but I'm here to talk about Platform SSO and tell this really bad dad joke. Let me make sure that that I tell it right. I'm going the wrong way. Okay, so I'm back at the calculator screen. What works faster than a calculator? And it's not the new calculator for iPad. This is the joke part. What works faster than a calculator? A CalcuNow. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. All right. I didn't know if it was going to go over, but thank you very much. Thank you very much. Kanji is proud to be a founding sponsor of the Mac Admins Foundation. And I'm one of the volunteer administrators of the Mac Admins Slack. So when you use the @admins in Slack because something's gone wrong and you need an admin one of the volunteer admins around the world, I'm one of the people that sees that and can help. In fact, there's 3 other admins for the Mac Admin Slack here, and at least one person on the board. The Mac Admins Foundation would love to hear your thoughts about how to make the Mac admin community even better. The survey is designed to gather your input on moderation practices and overall community experiences. Your feedback will guide our efforts to create a more supportive and engaging environment that meets the needs of all members. There's going to be more details in the Mac Admin Slack, or you can trust me and click that, go to that QR code. I promise it's not a Rickroll. I promise. The deadline is end of day for November 3rd. All right, so here's what I actually wanted to talk about, Platform SSO. I want you to feel comfortable with the ramifications of your choices around Platform SSO. So let's take a step back. Let's start by stepping back and thinking about what we're really trying to accomplish with passwords and Platform SSO. And to help answer that question of what we're really trying to accomplish, we're going to reflect on how we got to where we are today with Platform SSO. Then we're going to look at what we can do today and what the state of it is with Platform SSO. And then we're going to think about what's next with an eye towards being able to confidently share that vision with Apple, with IdP vendors, and with MDM vendors, and with your stakeholders. So as Andrew's mentioned earlier today, it's really easy to get caught up in our tooling and go for the technical win as opposed to what's really behind the scenes. What you're trying to solve might not be exactly what Apple wants you to solve, or your IdP vendor wants you to solve, or your MDM vendor wants you to solve. So let's step back and remind ourselves what we're trying to do. And I think that we can all agree that passwords are a problem. As a very personal example, when my dad set up his first Apple ID, he used his Hotmail email address. So he would constantly be confused about, okay, well, so I need to enter my Apple ID, but it's my Hotmail address. So is it my Hotmail password or is it my Apple ID password? And he would contact me and we would talk about other things. We'd talk about my dog, but he'd also talk about the tech problems that he was having often with passwords. And yes, I know that it's now called Apple Account, not Apple ID. So when I talk about Apple, when I say Tom Bridge, when I say Apple ID, I'm talking about what we called it in the past. When I talk about Apple Account, I'm talking about from now and into the future. So that's part of why I get excited when I hear about our passwordless future. And I think we're all excited about Platform SSO's potential to prevent password problems in the future. I think we're all aligned with Apple and Apple's values and Apple's approach. And I think we can all agree that these 3 elements are equally important, and it's really difficult to balance them in an organization. At the center is user experience, because user experience is central. User experience and privacy. Without users, we would all have very different jobs. In an organization, we also want that manageability and visibility. And of course, we want to secure things. So we're going to keep all three of these in mind as we go through this next hour. It's difficult to balance it, but that's part of our job. We tell users not to use the same password more than once. And again, step back and concepts and practices that are clear and easy to us, like, oh, well, why don't you just use a password manager? For us, that might make sense. For people who aren't in our shoes, that can seem kind of foreign. It can seem like a mystery. And it's just hard to remember which password is associated with which account. And also, at the same time, the bad guys are getting really sophisticated about getting people's passwords. We tell users, hey, don't give your password up to evildoers, but it's getting harder and harder to tell legitimately what's a dialogue where you should enter your password and what's someone that's doing a bad thing trying to get you to enter your password when you shouldn't. And here's an incomplete list of possible passwords and PINs that a user might have to remember. And down at the bottom, the ATM PIN. Like I wonder how many of our users have their ATM PIN is the same as their work iPhone. And there's definitely methods and tools that we've been using over the years to help consolidate password proliferation. And we're going to take a look at each one of these. This is just the overview slide. So one approach is to use an identity provider. Identity providers provide a crucial service for organizations. An organization can now federate Apple School Manager, Apple Business Manager with an IdP so that users can sign in to their Apple account with their IdP credentials. That's one less password to remember. And of course, users can access countless SSO-enabled services and websites using their IdP credentials. And of course, there's solutions like Kanji Passport, Xcreds, and others that you're very well aware of, designed to attempt to keep the Mac password in sync with the IdP password. Password managers like Apple's built-in Passwords app helps users manage their accounts and passwords. And there's third-party tools that do this very well. Services that use Sign In with Apple now allow people to leverage their Apple account to set up a privacy-preserving account that doesn't require them to remember yet another account. And passkeys, super exciting. But in order to use passkeys, iCloud Keychain and two-factor authentication must be on. And for kind of the combination of personal Apple account and managed Apple account, like that's still confusing. Andrew is shaking his hands like, no, there's danger there. But it feels like that's the future. It feels like, okay, today that's not there, but it feels like we're really close. iCloud Keychain is still a showstopper for some organizations, but again, I feel it's so close. I want to note here that Apple's implementation of passkeys allows the passkey to be available, and it's designed to be available on all devices that you're signed into with your Apple account. And I want to point out that that implementation might be different than other platforms. So other non-Apple platforms might have a different approach to passkeys, where the passkey is on that device and that device only. So what we're trying to do is provide a great user experience, preserve user privacy, prevent password confusion and proliferation, secure devices and organizational data, and prevent password phishing. A little bit about how we got here. Patrick mentioned 5 years ago, Apple had politely asked developers to exit the kernel space. So 5 years, I'm glad he mentioned 5 years because I opened up the developer app and did a search for what's new in device. And that I want to encourage you to use that search term because it catches both the old managing Apple devices, what's new in managing Apple devices title, as well as the new what's new in device management title. So the oldest one about managing Apple devices is 5 years ago, that same time when Apple said, please leave the kernel. WWDC 2019, 6 big things that I want to consider in our path to where we're at with Platform SSO. Let's dig into each of these 6 items. So user enrollment. This was new then. It was for personal, not organizational devices. Had the promise of creating a separate APFS container for organizational information that could be jettisoned as soon as the user decided, I don't want to be part of this, I'm going to unenroll. It included a different and curated set of management settings like IT can't wipe my personal device. And it included sign in with settings with Managed Apple ID. And it was called Managed Apple ID there. So I used that term. So we'll come back to user enrollment. The single sign-on extension, that started 5 years ago. Platform SSO built on that foundation. Yeah, this was huge. This was a big step in the right direction. Single sign-on extension. Apple School Manager and Apple Business Manager federated with Active Directory. I actually had to like, wait, was that true? Was it just 5 years ago that the first federation was with on-premises Active Directory? Yeah. It wasn't that long ago, but it seems like a huge sea change. 5 years ago, on-premises Active Directory was a lot more important, a lot more prevalent than it is today. As I've been, over the past 3 years at Kanji, I've been talking to customers and asking, oh, what's your IDP situation? And so many people are like, well, we're here, but we're going there. So many people the answer was, well, I'm embarrassed to say, but it's complicated, and they shouldn't be embarrassed because it's many places are in the same boat of moving from one place to another and not being on solid ground. So that was 5 years ago where we first saw the promise of integrating Apple Business Manager, Apple School Manager with on-prem AD. And today, in production, there's only 2 IDPs that are available to federate with. So again, I see the future, more possibilities in the future. Activation lock for Intel-based Mac with a T2 chip. That didn't appear until 5 years ago. And during the Mac Admins podcast episode with Jeremy Butcher from Product Marketing, from Apple, one of the questions that the hosts asked Jeremy was, okay, so is this going to be forced like iPad and iPhone? And he said, no, not now. That maybe was some foreshadowing for the answer to come in 5 years. System extensions. This is what Patrick mentioned. Developers were asked to leave the kernel and use system extensions instead. 2 kinds of extensions are different, system extension and Platform SSO extension. Those are two different extensions. The Platform SSO extension was an app extension. System extensions, the kernel extension replacements. So in that episode from 5 years ago with Jeremy, got a little bit of insight into the challenges with asking developers to leave the kernel space and to have vendors implement system extensions. And I want to share what he said about system extension adoption and the challenges. And so the kind of 4 steps is Apple needs to introduce the APIs. Like, they need to be there. Like, it's not really fair to kick developers out of the kernel if the system extension APIs aren't ready. The developers need to incorporate those APIs, and then the developers need to ship product based on, make the product available, and then the customers need to deploy those products. And that can take a long time. And I'm going to read the quote. Ultimately, folks need to hit the right stage of their deployment and planning and budgeting cycles so they can deploy these things. The hope is that we can get the word out enough now so they're budgeting for those changes both monetarily, to be able to afford them and budget them, but also from the time perspective to make sure that as soon as the vendor's ready, they're ready to roll out the product. And I think that I bring this up because I feel like we're in the same boat with Platform SSO, where the APIs from Apple have to be there. It's even more complicated because now we've got the IdP that has to be ready, and the MDM vendor has to be ready because the configuration profiles have to be delivered through MDM. So there's all these pieces that have to be put in place, not to mention you all in the audience as customers, you need to be ready to evaluate this software, to be able to buy the software, to be able to deploy it and roll it out and make sure that it does what you want it to do. So I think we're in a time where 5 years from now, we're going to look back and say, oh, can you believe that in 2024 we were at this state? And it's going to be fun. And as long as I've been managing Apple devices, there's always been that lack. There's always been that, if we could only get that one thing, our deployments would be so much easier. Our life would be easy. We could sit on the beach and not worry about the next deployment and imaging and all of that. But like DJ said on Tuesday, it's a continual process. We're always going to be weeding. We're always going to be replanting. We're always going to be nurturing, and it's a continual process. And I've come to love that. But that doesn't mean I'm not frustrated. So we're still talking about things introduced in 2019. Before 2019, there was no authentication required for automated device enrollment. You remember that? Anyone that found a new Apple device that was enrolled in Apple Business Manager, Apple School Manager, that fell off a truck, they could unbox it, turn it on, and enroll in whatever MDM, Apple Business Manager, Apple School Manager told it to enroll in. So they could potentially get access to corporate resources that they shouldn't otherwise get access to. So enrollment customization was a huge step forward. And all three of these points are still true today. The Apple Business Manager, Apple School Manager sends the URL to the device. The device displays the web view where, that allows authentication to the IdP. And the OS never gets the password that the user enters. And there was a question in the Mac Admins podcast, like, or I don't know if it was, at some point in time, someone said, and the system will never get that password. And anytime someone says never, I'm like, ooh, what does that mean? Like, never this year or never in 5 years? It's like, never? Really? Never's a long time. So I'm going to illustrate this enrollment customization with a few screenshots. So just so we're on the same page, this is what it looks like if your MDM solution requires the user to, this whole process, if your MDM solution requires a user to authenticate against an IdP during Setup Assistant. So in Kanji, here's what the settings look like. Notice in the configuration, we not only require authentication against an IdP, but we also assign the user to the device record. We pre-fill the initial account creation details and prevent the user from changing the full name and the account name. So great, that's the setting. Here's the user experience. They see the screen that says, here's the IdP. Please enter your username. In this case, it's OCTA. Please enter your password. MFA is involved. I do the push notification. And in this particular workflow, I am displaying the Create a Computer account screen. Some organizations will skip this and have MDM create that local admin account and then display Xcreds or Kanji Passport or whatever login window replacement so that that first user is nice and special. So the thing that I want to point out is that I can, as the user, I can create whatever password I want here. I mean, as long as it meets the requirements of macOS, 4 characters. So already, if we're trying to reduce the number of passwords that people use, like, okay, well, I entered my super secure IdP password, but now for my local Mac password, I could just enter whatever I want. So that was a list of exciting things, 6 things that I wanted to share to kind of help set the stage that were announced in 2019. Let's skip a little bit to 2021. I was on lots and lots and lots of calls with customers who told us they wanted to keep the local Mac password synced with their IdP password. And throughout this session, we can kind of think together about, is that the best approach? Is that what you really want? Do you really want your IdP password to be the same as your Mac password? And just want to gently put that question in your head. Do you really want to do that? In our case, we said, all right, you really want to do that. You've explained the context. And in the context of your organization, it does make sense. Where you're at, in your path, in your journey, for your organization, it does make sense to make sure that the local Mac password is synced as much as possible with the IdP password. Now, personally, I wished that we would hear from a WWDC session that, hey, we're Apple and we rewrote the login window so that it works with IdPs. But that didn't happen. And it didn't happen, and it kept not happening. So at Kanji, we said, all right, well, we're going to write a replacement for login window, and we called it Kanji Passport. And it's beautiful. We were really aligned with Apple, and we wanted the login window replacement to have that Apple look and feel. We allowed organizations to brand it so that they'd have their own organization brand. We had the shutdown, restart, sleep buttons, and you could configure that. It was very straightforward to configure and deploy. And customers said, cool, that's great, but what about MFA? So we're like, but we have this really nice login window replacement. And they're like, well, no, that's cute, but we really need MFA. So we iterated and decided, all right, well, we're going to make a web view available. So you can either choose the native-looking username and password field, or we could display a web view. And I'm gonna come back to our first implementation, because this is written in Swift. We displayed the username and password field. The user would enter this in, and because it was our code, we knew what the password was that the user entered. And we could use that password to create the user account with the password that they just tried to log in with. And we could use that password to verify with the IdP that the password is correct and to create that local account and do all sorts of really nice magic. Well, when we implemented the web view, the web login, we made the choice to use the OIDC Resource Owner Password Grant flow, the ROPG, where Passport can securely get the password that the user enters and provides to the IdP. And so, again, we can get that password that the user provides to the IdP and then use that to create a local user account and to see, does the local user account match the IdP? And customer said, yeah, that's cute, but I use Google Workspace. And we're like, well, that's great, but Google Workspace doesn't support ROPG. And they're like, I don't care. I want to have my users who use Google Workspace log in and have my Google Workspace password be the same as my local Mac password. So we iterated again and said, all right, well, so here in 2023, so 2021 was the first iteration, 2022 is the web login, 2023 was, support for Google Workspace. Now, Google, as I mentioned, doesn't support resource owner password grant, so it's not possible for Passport to get the password that the user provides to Google. So without that, we can't keep the passwords in sync. So instead of using the web view, we use Swift code to display the username and password field and securely send those credentials to Google using secure LDAP to verify that the credentials are correct. So in order to configure that, the organization has to configure secure LDAP and give us the certificate that they use for secure LDAP. Okay, cool. That's cool, but we're here to talk about Platform SSO. So let's go back to the developer app and use Platform SSO in quotes as the search term. There's 3 sessions in the developer app that include Platform SSO. 2022, 2023, 2024. Remember that the single sign-on extension was introduced in 2019. The first Platform SSO session was 3 years later in 2022. So we have a blog entry about it. Platform SSO will allow users to sign in once at the login window and in doing so also be signed in to apps and websites that use the organization's IdP. Now, it's interesting to me that they still use the term sign in, because if you check the Apple style guide, there's 2 very different verbs. One is login and one sign in. So login is after you turn your Mac on, you log into your Mac. Sign in is the verb that we're supposed to use when we describe signing in with credentials to access services. So Platform SSO is leveraging single sign-on. So that was an interesting thing to note. But like, Apple's not bound by the Apple style guide. That's when I was writing books under contract for Peach Pit for Apple, I was bound by the Apple style guide. Like, I had to follow that. And when I would insist to people that, well, the Apple style guide says not to pluralize trademark names, so that's why I say Mac computers instead of Macs, and I say iPhone devices instead of iPhones. People would be like, well, Tim Cook says Macs. I'm like, what? I'm not going to tell Tim Cook not to say Macs. It's really interesting that it was positioned, Platform SSO was positioned as an alternative to binding to Active Directory and using mobile accounts. It needed cooperation between the IdP and an MDM solution in order to deploy supporting profiles. Some other cool things about Platform SSO when it first came out: if the identity provider password changes, Platform SSO will validate that new password with the identity provider on unlock. So from lock screen, you can enter the IdP new password, and Platform SSO would do everything necessary to change the Mac password and the keychain password and file vault. Like file vault, didn't blink. It was so cool. Also, that 2022 WWDC session announced that Apple Business Manager is now able to federate with Google Workspace. So first Active Directory, then Google Workspace. That's kind of cool. And that you can use sign-in with Apple with what were then still called managed Apple IDs. Nice. I'm seeing some. This is okay. Things are getting a little bit easier as time goes on. Also, support for OAuth 2 and enrollment single sign-on for BYOD user enrollment. So an evolution of where user enrollment is going. 2023, Apple announced adding support for OpenID Connect support and Apple School Manager and Apple Business Manager. Very cool. iCloud Keychain for managed Apple IDs, which meant theoretically you could use passcodes, passkeys with managed Apple IDs, as they were called. And WWDC 2023 brought the news that you'll be able to force enrollment after the Mac hits the network, with the user being able to delay for only 8 hours. So when the activation lock first came on with Intel-based Mac with the T2 chip, it's like, yep, no, that's not going to be forced. But now it can be. So it's kind of different where you get a Mac out of the box, turn it on, don't join network. You can continue with the enrollment process. Well, not the enrollment process, with the setup assistant. But as soon as that Mac hits the network, you're going to see a dialog saying, "Hey, this Mac should be enrolled. Let's do the enrollment." The user can say, "Not now," and delay that for up to 8 hours. After that 8 hours is up, you can't use that Mac anymore unless you enroll. That's pretty cool. Nice evolution for organizations. So some exciting new features announced in 2024 for Platform SSO for macOS 14. Remember when the Mac with Apple Silicon was first announced, we learned that as opposed to Intel-based Mac, where the system volume is locked until you unlock it at the login window, and I struggled when I was doing the Support Essentials books to find a way to describe the login window when FileVault was locked versus the login window when FileVault was not unlocked. And it frustrated me that there wasn't two separate terms. And I think part of that frustration, or part of the reason why there weren't two different terms for that, was because very soon it wouldn't matter anymore. And a lot of times when we're looking for answers from Apple for right now, here today, the engineers that are working on the next version, 2 versions, are like, that's not going to be a problem. Like, that's not where we need to be focusing our energy on. Like, that dealing with that problem today is going to take away from where we need to go. That's kind of how I feel. I don't know, no one's ever said that, but that's just what I feel like is happening. So back to this Intel-based Mac with FileVault turned on. The system volume's locked. It's not, macOS isn't running until you unlock FileVault. Well, then we heard with a silicon-based, a Mac with Apple Silicon, that even when FileVault's turned on, after a restart, macOS was running at the FileVault login window. And my thought was, wow, that means that MDM can go touch that Mac even if FileVault's on and no one's logged in yet. That's not the case yet. I just want to be really clear. But with Platform SSO now, we can unlock FileVault with the IdP as long as that Mac is on the network and can access the IdP. That's super exciting. That's the one piece that I know that we can do with a Mac that is not yet logged in at FileVault after restart. And I fully expect that there will be more to come, or I hope there will be more to come. I'm going to speak separately about these other 2 boxes here. For FileVault login window and lock screen, you can specify a policy such as, hey, it's okay if the Mac is offline, you can still log in with the credential that works to log in, to open FileVault, to log in, to unlock the lock screen. And you can also apply a grace period. So you can say, all right, well, that's cool, you can log in and use your Mac, but within, let's say, 8 hours, if you haven't been able to contact the IdP, then we're not going to let you use the Mac anymore. And that third big improvement that was announced for WWDC 2024 is that Platform SSO can use HPKE. Now, here's a blog post about HPKE from Cloudflare. It is the hybrid public key encryption standard. I wish I could get into the details because this is so much fun and I love public-private key. Like, I could just go on and on, but we need to keep going to the next section. So let's take a look at the resources that are available today and then some solutions. So from developer.apple.com, and I'm going to share only stuff that's publicly available. There's some other documentation that is not publicly available. I don't feel comfortable sharing screenshots from that. So trying to go on what's available today. So let's break it down. Platform SSO. Use credentials from macOS login to perform single sign-on with IdP. Fairly straightforward headline. Notice that the headline isn't about syncing passwords. But for us, like, we're excited about Platform SSO because syncing passwords. Or at least for me. At least for me. So use credentials from macOS login to perform single sign-on with an IdP. It's a replacement for binding to directory services. Wait, directory services? I wrote a book about that in 2005. That's about centralized credentials for logging in, right? No, maybe not here. Maybe not here. It builds on enterprise SSO capabilities, so SSO extensions can also perform single sign-on for apps and websites. It integrates with macOS and doesn't use JavaScript to render web pages for authentication. That's it. Interesting call out that it doesn't use JavaScript. Is that like about scraping passwords in web pages? I'm not sure. The system stores the SSO tokens in the keychain and only shares them with the SSO extension. Notice that this says SSO tokens, not the user password. No, it's not the user password in the keychain, it's SSO tokens. The SSO extension then uses the SSO tokens to authenticate the user to their on-premises apps and on websites as needed. Again, not about password sync. If the SSO tokens are missing, expired, or more than 4 hours old, Platform SSO attempts to refresh or retrieve new tokens from the IdP. So 4 hours, like there's nothing about, hey, if the password changes on the IdP, the user will immediately see a notification. It's like you got 4 hours for that token to expire. 4 authentication methods, password and encrypted password. That's one method. So the text around that is the IdP uses the local account password and keeps it in sync. Okay, finally, a mention about passwords in sync, local Mac password and IdP passwords, including password updated from the login window and screensaver unlock. I wonder about File Vault. Why that's not mentioned there. Password with WS Trust. You can ask Joel Rennick about it. He loves talking about WS Trust. User Secure Enclave Key. It's a big one. Secure Enclave backed key can authenticate with the IdP without a password and without changing the local account password. What's not spelled out here is that if you change your IdP password, you don't need to change your local Mac password. And if you're able to change your local Mac password with abandon, even if the Mac's offline, and you don't need to update your IdP password, like there's not a problem with those two passwords going out of sync and changing things. And you don't need to worry if your Mac password policy doesn't match your IdP password policy. But it also means that you do not get password sync, which is what lots of people have told me that they absolutely need. It's also worth noting that in the WWDC 2024, What's New in Device Management, I couldn't find Secure Enclave mentioned in the transcript. And lastly, Smart Card. If you're already using Smart Card, that's great for you. But I wouldn't, and I don't think anyone would say that you should switch to Smart Card just to use Platform SSO. Just out of curiosity, can I see a show of hands of how many people are not using Smart Card? I just wanted you all to raise your hand. Okay, so most of the people, how many people are using Smart Card? 1, 2, 3. Keep your hands up high so I can count them. 1, 2, 3, 4-ish. Okay, cool. So yeah, Smart Card works great with Platform SSO. So I think we've got a hard choice: password sync or using user secure enclave key, and kind of going towards a passwordless future. A little bit more. Platform SSO can create new local accounts on demand at the login window using IDP credentials. Remember from last year when I talked about Bootstrap token? There's a bunch of requirements for that just in time. The file vault has to be unlocked. A local user already has to exist. The MDM solution has to support Bootstrap token. So this isn't a out-of-the-box use your IDP to create that first user account. Another thing that I don't remember where I've seen it, but just needs to be said, that a user created, and I might be wrong about this, but a user created at that just-in-time login window creation by Platform SSO is not MDM enabled, if that's important to you. So keep going, and also integrate IDP group membership with macOS. You can use network accounts for authorization, and groups can also authorize network accounts. Use device management to securely configure Platform SSO, including device and user registration, configuring groups, and managing account permissions. The system can also retrieve Kerberos ticket granting tickets, import them into a credential cache, and optionally share them with the Kerberos SSO extension. It's cool. Kerberos isn't dead yet. I'm going to ask you to show of hands again if you're actively using Kerberos. Oh, great. It's like a third, or like a quarter, a third of people. Cool. There's even more details in this article that's linked to the last article called Creating Extensions. Here's the first public mention of SSO 2.0 that I've seen from Apple. Again, there's 3 supported grant types: password, secure enclave key, smart card, and encrypted password. I've seen password and encrypted password together before, but it's here. And WS Trust, which again, Joe likes to make fun of. What exactly is Platform SSO 2.0? I'll tell you. Platform SSO 2.0 adds a new key service for SSO extensions and IdPs, which enables an alternative registration flow and additional login configuration. And in the second paragraph, the key service registers encryption keys to unlock the Mac at login window and screensaver unlock. So even if your Mac has a PIN and your IDP password is a complex password, you can provide your complex IDP password at the login window or screen lock instead of your PIN, right? My first trainer mentor who was at Apple and taught me to be a trainer, Timo Perfit, has a great collection of resources at twocanoes.com/SSO. I really like his white lab coat approach. Articles, tutorials, code, video, related articles. This is mostly aimed at developers who are trying to implement Platform SSO, but there's nuggets in there that are useful for us to try to figure out what Platform SSO really means to us, what we want to get out of it, what's possible. Podcast episode, a link to the Slack channels, a blog post, sample code, more videos, vendor-related links, and of course you can hire him to help develop your Platform SSO software. But here's that article from Two Canoes, what's new for Platform SSO and macOS Sequoia. He's got more details here about those new policies for file vault, login, lock screen, timing, the delay if it's not available, if you can't contact the IDP. Microsoft has some great documentation, some great videos from the PSU Mac admins a couple months ago. They're really leaning into the secure enclave version instead of a password sync version. So see that green bubble? Microsoft Windows Hello for Business uses a PIN gesture for login, and Microsoft says things like, "Hey, if you know your PIN, if I know your PIN to your device, whether that's your phone or your Windows laptop, and your device is 1,000 miles away, your PIN is useless to me because I need to be at your device in order to use your PIN." But what happens if someone steals your device and knows your PIN? Well, now your PIN's really useful. But what happens if someone steals your device and doesn't know your PIN or your password? Does your password really all that more secure than a PIN? I'm going to say maybe not. There's brute force protections for modern Apple devices where at the login window, whether it's file vault, whether it's after a fresh reboot or not, after entering a wrong password a number of times, there's escalating delays and then finally a wipe. So kind of makes me think like, yeah, sure, Microsoft's going to say our approach using Windows Hello for Business is the best way to go because that they're biased towards their Windows approach. But it does make me think, well, when we first got our iPhones, there was no app store. People weren't banking, well, most people weren't banking on their iPhone. And we used password policy for our Mac to make sure we got a really complex password, a really secure password on the Mac, but maybe a 6-digit PIN or 6-character passphrase on the phone. So I really want to push us to think about, is it okay to have a passcode or passphrase or PIN on our Mac to protect resources like we do on our iPhone or iPad? Let's think about that. Microsoft has some really good publicly available comparison table in their Configure Platform SSO for macOS devices in their Microsoft Intune article. I've got a link to it. I swear that's not a Rickroll. Let's zoom in on this article for that publicly available table. Look at that. Microsoft is all greens for the secure enclave authentication method. All those green checkboxes except the one for local Mac password sync. And look at their take on that third column, password. Microsoft considers that method not phishing resistant. So again, they're really bullish on secure enclave and no password sync. Okta has a separate SKU called Okta Device Access. Okta Device Access is made up of 2 different products: Desktop MFA for macOS and Desktop Password Sync. Desktop Password Sync is the piece that implements Platform SSO, including version 2.0. Desktop Password Sync uses Platform SSO, and it relies on Okta Verify. So there's 2 apps. There's basically 2 apps that are available with the Platform SSO extension available to be deployed: Microsoft Company Portal and Okta Verify. Those are the 2 today. 5 years from now, I can't wait to look back at 2024. What's next? Oh, if I had a magic wand, what if macOS Setup Assistant knew your IdP password that you provided? Like, that could save so many problems. Like, what if, just imagine with me, what if you take your device you take your Mac out of the box, go through Setup Assistant, remote management screen, click yes, authenticate against your IdP, and you're at your desktop. You skip creating the computer account, you skip registering your device, you skip registering your account, and like all the hassle that's involved. Like, that would be kind of cool. I don't know if that's possible, but I mean, there's a lot of smart people in the world that can do a lot of smart things. Maybe that could help keep the Mac account password synced with the IdP password, but maybe that's a terrible idea. Maybe the reason you can't do this is because it's a terrible idea for your Mac password to be the same as your IdP password. Maybe we're holding on too tightly to the past. Maybe we're holding too tightly to the way we've always done things. What if we shifted to the iOS and iPadOS model where users use a PIN or passphrase instead of a password, like an IdP password? Maybe we could approach passwordless. So just in summary, we took a look at what are we trying to do? We're trying to reduce the frustration and agony associated with passwords. How did we get here? It's been an interesting journey over the past 5 years. We want to keep passwords from being phished, from being reused from evil. We saw that Microsoft's company portal and Okta Verify are the two apps that are available today to implement Password SSO. And I've got 15 seconds left for questions. Any questions?